Hello, everyone. This is Nikolai, Be Pure Forever for Raising Readers, and this is our third webinar. A couple of things. Last week, I was supposed to have this figured out, the whole group chat thing. I'm going to try it. Hopefully, some of you guys can get on. I had some people say that they tried and it didn't work, but I'm trying it now. This is our third webinar. I will be doing these every single Wednesday at 9, so make sure that you guys tune in. And basically the purpose of these webinars is because I have the Raising Readers Early Literacy program already out. That's the DVD. And of course, you can look on the YouTube and get a whole lot of free YouTube videos that will help you with alphabetizing and just increasing literacy skills for your child if they're under the age of 6, if they haven't gone to kindergarten. But we have children that are already in kindergarten, first, second, third grade that are struggling with literacy, and parents always ask me for tips, and so that is why I'm doing the webinar. So if you have a struggling reader, I do want you to know that I do have services where I will tutor your child as well as yourself. So parent and child sessions, and I will do that. And so if you are interested in those services or know someone that's interested in those services, you can email me at urbanbailout@gmail.com. But this is an alternative way to get information and access to me, of course, free of charge. So definitely send in your questions if you're having issues. So last week, I left off, we're going a little bit through reading comprehensions and things that you can do to increase reading comprehension with your children. And I'm going to jump into writing today and just some tips about writing. But before I do that, I wanted to close out a tip that I didn't get to give you last week, which was summarizing ideas and how important that is to develop for reading comprehension, because a lot of times we have to kind of benchmark and make sure that our children are actually understanding what they're reading. So one way to do that, and I'm going to go through it as if the child was under the age of 5. This is a skill that we can develop in children. I've done it with 2- and 3-year-olds. And so it's whenever you're reading a new book, you're going to go through it. So you're going to read and point to every page, of course. So you do it every page. And then you start with the book again. And you say, I'm going to summarize this book. And you start reading, but you don't read the words on it. You just say kind of a one-liner of what that page was about. And so basically you summarize the idea of every single page, right? So if the child is big enough, so let's say if a child was like 3 or 4, you can probably go through this again, and now you say, now let's summarize it together. And you will go through the same book and give the child, so let's say this picture is about, this page is about if a kangaroo has a mother. Or you would say if a kangaroo has and then the child would say mother. So basically you would repeat your summary sentence that you did on the exercise before, but you would leave out like the last word or the first word, basically getting them to summarize it with you, which is they're repeating it. So once you go through it, then you would do the same story, and you would say, now you summarize it for me. And you would go through the book and have them summarize that sentence. If they can't summarize that sentence, it's okay. So you might do that one time with a book. And next time you read it, you read the book, and again, you open the book up, and then page by page, you summarize the page, and then you go through all the pages, Then you go through each page, and you and the child summarize that sentence, that page, and complete the sentence together. And the idea is that at some point you can have a child actually summarize each of the pages independently. They can tell you. So I have basically what you're showing children is how to summarize at that point. And a lot of our children don't know how to summarize and synthesize an idea after they have read it. And so if we start really, really early, that's something that later on it's so necessary. But you can really start that very, very early. So I'm sure I'll go through that again many times because it's one of my favorite skills to build early. But now that we're doing the webinars for all the children that are already struggling, the way to do that, the way that I do, this is kind of a complex book to do it, but what you can do is, so let's say you're reading a page. Again, like I always say, when we're doing a reading intervention, when we're working with a child that is already a struggling reader, you have to realize that at this point, your sessions with your child are for you guys to work together as a team. Especially because a lot of our children that are already struggling already feel alienated, their spirits are already broken, and so what we want to do is we really want to get on the same page. We want to shift the energy from you're struggling, you need this help, to I'm here with you, we're going to go and we're going to tackle this together. So very, like I always say, the skill that we need, it's always the same skill. So the skills that we need for literacy are the same at 2 years old, 3 years old, 4, 5, 11, 35, it doesn't matter. So we're always going to have these skills. We're always going to develop the same skills. It's just that they will vary in complexity. And so here we did it in a very basic way. Now we're going to do it for an older child. So I'm going to read this page. Right? So you will read a page or a paragraph, and then after you will read that page or the paragraph, you would summarize that page or paragraph. Simple enough. So I will read it for the first time, then I'm going to summarize it, and then I will have the child repeat to me what it is, read it and summarize it themselves. And you will alternate. So you would do one page and they would do the other one. When they summarize it, you repeat what they have told you is the summary sentence, or whatever they have said that they summarize, you will repeat it, and then whenever you summarize something, they will repeat it. And so that's it. But it's very important that when you're reading something, that when you're working on this particular skill, that you read a paragraph and then you go right into summarizing that paragraph, or summarizing that short story, or summarizing that page. I like to do it page by page. So if you can think of a child that's having an issue because they're getting lost, because they're focusing so much on decoding and on their fluency, and they're not remembering what they've read, this is a great skill that will give you insight on whether or not they're able to summarize, synthesize the information, and if they're really understanding in a way that's even sometimes more insightful than them just answering questions. Because a lot of the times, and this is a problem, children are taught test-taking skills. And so what will happen sometimes is that children will learn to look for words, keywords, clue words, and they can sort of figure out the answer to something in a multiple choice question, and because of those keywords. And so that's one strategy, and that's a great thing. But when you actually go through reading a paragraph, summarizing it, reading a sentence, summarizing it, reading a page and summarizing it, you will know if your child is really understanding what it is that they're reading, instead of just answering questions. So that's a skill that, again, you should start building it, and it's something that 3-year-olds can do. But if you have an older child, you also should do it actively. You do it with the child. So we will go over other things for reading comprehension. That's just kind of the back end of what I wanted to close out with last week. So make sure that you check out that video and that you know that this explanation was the back end of that. So today I wanted to talk about writing because it's such an important skill. We have to be able to write. We have to, especially not just in struggling readers. I always say that we have to raise our children, both academically and emotionally and socially and spiritually. We have to raise our children to be great adults. We have to raise our children now for what they're going to be later. That's the point. What we're doing here in raising these children is really creating the society that we want to live in, creating the community that we want to live in. And so when we think about their success, I challenge you to not think about it in terms of their grades, in terms of their honor roll or their dean's list or their principal's list or any of that, because all of those things are subject to how, like, if it's on a curve, if your district is really good or not. I mean, it has to do with a lot of things. Do they really get along with their teacher? Are they underperforming or overperforming because of their teacher? And so there are a lot of variables that can come into play when it comes to how your child is doing. And so you can have a child who is really, really good at math or really understands the skill or is really good with literacy or any of those things, and then but doesn't get straight A's. So my son will be one of them if he was in regular school, because he has other things that are just not that important to him and probably not that important to me. But just know that there are other ways for you to benchmark your children and to measure how well they're doing. And the more intimate your relationship is with your children and their education and their learning process, the more that you will be able to gauge that with for yourself with something other than their grades. So sometimes parents think that their children are failing because they're going through grades. Sometimes their children, they think their children are excelling because they're going through grades, their school grades, and both can be incorrect, because your child could be doing very, very well subject to a particular curriculum that has been dumbed down, or subject to a particular curriculum or criteria within that classroom or that district that's really not competitive in a larger scale. And so if your child is doing really good in that, it's not that big of a deal. So the same things, it can be on one side or the other. And the more intimate your relationship is with your child, and the more you engage with something more than homework, but really have a relationship with a child and their learning and where they are, you will be able to gauge their success or where they're lacking the best. And so that's why, we're taking over this literacy instruction and really numeracy instruction, all kinds of instructions with regards to our children. So do something other than grades. I digressed, and this is not where I was going. So we want to look at writing, because if we think about our children, not just as current readers, not just as first graders, second graders, but as future citizens, the future producers of our community. What do we have? Anytime that you have a graduate school degree, or if you're an entrepreneur and you need grants, or if you need to write business plans, or if you work in corporate America and you need to, produce reports. One of the things that differentiates people at different socioeconomic levels is your ability to write. It's one of the reasons why, if you are getting a PhD, you have to do a dissertation. If you're getting a master's, you have to write a thesis, and so on and so on, because you have to be able to produce work that you have written and that it comes from you. And so reading is definitely fundamental, but if we think about it in a larger scale, in a more long-term scale, we have to be able to both be great readers and great writers. We have to be able to produce. And writing also involves having analytical skills and having independent thought, and those are things that leaders have. And so writing is very important. And if you can write, then it shows, and like it will, your children's writing will give you a lot of insight to their where they're at in terms of their emotional development, their psychological development, their interests, and how analytical they are. So the writing really is such a benchmark for your children. And a lot of times, again, parents will go on whether or not their children can read sight words, so many words per minute, all of those things, they're great. But again, whether they can answer questions about the text, again, all of those things are great, but we want to take it one step further, and we want to make sure that our children are writing, and know that writing comes before reading. So when you're first starting out writing, teaching your children to read, you're going to see that they can write before they can read, because if you know your letter sounds and you know words and you can draw a picture and you know that that's your mom, you may not be able to read the word mom, but you couldn't go and write mom. Or if you have a pet, you can dog or whatever. If you draw, the child draws the sun and knows the three sounds, they can kind of sound out sun. And so they will be able to write, and you should be encouraging for children to write before they're ready to read. A child might be ready to read at 5, but could have been writing since the age of 2. So early on, this is going to be what early writing looks like. For example, so if a child, you guys are going to say I'm a terrible illustrator, but let's say your child is 3 years old, or 2, or 36, and wants to draw a sun, right? So this is my sun, and this is my tree, right? So when I say early writing, it's as simple as they can just write sun, just like that. And here they can write right, something like that. And the spelling is incorrect, and they could even make some mistakes phonetically. So that's what I was trying to do here. But know that they're writing. So anytime, that's why it's so important to teach your children the sounds before their letter names, because anytime that they're, check this out, guys. If a child draws this, right? And you're like, oh, great, what is that? And they say, that's my mom. And this is my cousin. And this is my doll. And that's the TV, right? These 3 scribbles are whatever they say. If they know their sounds, you can say, okay, well, let's write mom. And they might be able to do this. And cousin could be cousin. So a child might be able to write before they can even do a really advanced drawing, so long as they know their letter sounds. That's that. They can also, let's say they say this is mom, and they go to write mom, and they know the sound. They go mom, but then they do like this, right? Or like a little scribble like that, and they write mom. All you would do at that point is say, oh, that's great. Mommy would write it like this. That's great how you wrote it. I would write it like this. And then you just write it however you would write it next. Or you can say it's grown-up language. So they would write it, and you won't correct it in terms of, like, you don't want to scratch it out or anything like that. But you can just very gently write it the way that you would write it next to it. And So it's very easy to get very, very young children to write. So that's the first thing I wanted to do. Again, we're talking about struggling readers. So now we'll shift to an older child. I'm always just going to give you the early version of the skill because you may have mixed age children, or because you can, now that you have a child that's struggling, once again, you can tell the next person with a younger child to make sure that they go ahead and prepare them, right? So for older children, what I want you to know is that we have to make sure that they're prepared to write. But if your child is struggling with literacy, like chances are that they're also struggling with, in terms of reading, that they're also struggling with writing and having their own independent writing. Two things that could be due to two things. One, they're having a mechanical issue with their hand, so they're not comfortable with writing. And in that case, and this is, I'll give you a couple of tools for that. So one of the first things that I like to do is, and I like to do this in between, anytime that you have problems with handwriting, of course you can do tracing. But children are kind of tired of doing that at school, and they have to write so much, and we're trying to kind of like take the layers out and make this more engaging. So one of the things that I like to do is, I would do it on a piece of paper, but I'll do it on the board so you guys can kind of get it, is that I would do like a little scribble. You guys, I was rushing to get home to this webinar, so I'm a little bit all over the place. I apologize. So I would do like a little scribble, and I would make it intricate. I'll show you right now. Like, you want to, look, could you see it? No, you can't. Okay. So I'll do it on the board. You want to do like a little scribble on a piece of paper, like maybe like this, right? Like a little scribble. Mind you, you're doing this on a piece of paper, right? And then you would take turns. I like to do it with colored pencils so that it's more interesting, but you can do it without it. And then you would have the child go next to you, and they would come and trace it like that. So usually, actually, you want to start from the inside, and then they would come and they trace it like that. And then you would do it on top of that. And then they'll do it over it, right? So try to kind of like, when you first start yours, make it really squiggly. But what that will do is it will have your child, especially if you're doing it in a piece of paper, what it will do, it will start having your child have to control that hand, because they have to follow your pattern. So that's one thing that I like to do, like in between exercises, just do it on a piece of paper and take turns. You do a squiggly, see the little squiggle, there it is, that you can see it. So then they will trace it, and then you will trace it, and they will trace it, and you will take turns, and that's really gonna get kind of cool with all the colors. But what that's going to do is going to have your child get an exercise in having control of writing inside a space without it being just traditional tracing. So that's one thing. The other thing is, you don't just give them a blank piece of paper and expect for them to start writing. A lot of the times, this is why I love these, and you can get one of these at IKEA for like 15 bucks. So everyone should have one, because it makes you look really, really cool to have one. The other thing is because it's non-threatening. So sometimes when children are already feeling overwhelmed because they're struggling and now they get to write some more at home, this kind of gives them a little bit of freedom. For younger children, writing on vertical surfaces, large vertical surfaces, actually activates memory. And so you want to practice on a large vertical space. So you want to either dry eraser board or like a chalkboard, or if you want to do chalkboard or craft paper on your walls and just give them a big space. Whenever you're writing on a big vertical space, you activate parts of the brain because you're moving large muscles and you're using your brain and you're using your hands. And so that's very, very good for young children to practice writing on a board. So have one of these, and you can actually do a writing exercise on here. So let's say the exercise, I know it's not covering everything, hold on. So let's say you wanted to do something like my house, right? So you're gonna see this, my house. You would write with your child together in a joint exercise. So this is one thing that I want you to know, that if you're working on writing, the first thing that you're going to do is, with everything, is the first part of the exercise, you're going to do it jointly, or you're going to demonstrate it. So my house, and then you say, you know, what do we want to write about our house? So what's going to be the thematic theme sentence? So the main idea, right? So what's going to be the main idea? What's going to be the main topic? Whatever about the house. And you guys come up with that sentence together. Then you're going to come up with 2 to 3, and I know you guys cannot see this, so I apologize, but you're going to come up with 2 to 3 details. Detail number 1, detail number 2, 3, 4. And you're going to, my house is green, my house is warm, I live there with blah, 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 blah. So you're gonna come up with a theme sentence, you're gonna come up with 4 details, and then you're gonna come up with your closing sentence. I love my house, right? So that's the closing sentence. So my house, let me tell you something about my house, or I want to share with you something about my house, or my house is the place where I live, whatever. Main sentence, 3 to 4 details. Those details, you're going to develop them as sentences, right? Supporting sentences, and then kind of the last one. So it could be, I'm sharing something. This is a story about my house. My house is on Highland Park, Minnesota. I live there with my mom. My house is pink. It used to be black. And I love living in my house, right? So kind of a sentence at the end that kind of summarizes the paragraph. Now, you guys might think that this is really simple, or that this is redundant. But a lot of children have a hard time coming up with a well-constructed paragraph. And so this is very, very critical skill to have in writing that a lot of our children are having difficulties doing themselves. So it's very important that the first exercise when you sit with your child, you go through the exercise together. You come up with 1 topic sentence, 3 to 4 details, you create the sentence, you actually write it out, and then in the bottom one, you kind of summarize it. So you have that structure. Topic sentence, 4 details, summarizing sentence, right? So you do it through your child. Then you would have your child do one on their own. And so that could be a session. But it's very important that you always model the exercise. That's the whole point of this, that you have to model the exercise for your child, particularly when you're doing a reading intervention. They're already overwhelmed. So the first part of the exercise, that's why when we read, I always say, you read first. You summarize first. Now you're going to do a writing exercise. Okay, so you write first. You can do it jointly, but for the most part, you want to create the format that you want your child to do. Even if you weren't going to get like a book, right? Let's say you want to get a book. And the book has a worksheet and you're going to complete that worksheet. That's going to be what you're going to do. No, you do the worksheet first with your child. Your child, this is a reading intervention. You have to model if they knew what to do and how to do it, they wouldn't be in a reading intervention. Clearly, they need the work and how the child is going to get better and how the child is going to see you as the authority is for you to demonstrate and model that skill. And so that's really what I wanted to get at. So once you do that, so if I'm working on writing, I would, just like with the child. So let's take a step back. How we will model the same skill with an early literacy would be you ask the child to do a drawing, and then you want them to label it. They might label it with correct spelling or not. That's not the point. The point is they do the drawing and then they label some of the things with their letter sounds on the piece of paper. That's you practicing early literacy, early writing with a 2, 3, 4-year-old. How you would model that would be for you to draw something. So now you draw it and you label it. So you're going to draw it, you're going to label it. Once your child gets into the habit of labeling, you will draw things with your child. When your child will draw something, but you will draw something. And you're going to start writing a sentence. This is my house. Instead of house, you're going to graduate to a sentence. This is my house, period. Capitalized, period. Write a proper sentence. This is you with your child that's 3. If you start labeling with your child at 18 months, even if it's a scribble, if you start labeling with your child when they're 18 months, 24 months, 2 years old, and once you see that they are labeling, now mind you, they might not be labeling with proper spelling. Once again, you would say, that's great, this is how mommy would, and then you sound it out, and then you write it right next to them. Perfectly okay to do that. Then, once you know that they already are learning that once they draw the picture, they're going to label some of the things there, what you're going to graduate to is you write simple sentences with proper sentence structure. You're going to write it all lowercase, just like you would write, but you're going to, of course, have your capital in the beginning, and you're going to have your period. That's all you're going to do. And little by little, your child will model that. And your child will start way before kindergarten drawing, labeling, and writing their own sentences. That's why it's so important to start early. Okay, let's take it back. Now that you have a child that's older and you're practicing a skill, you're developing a skill, what you want to do is, if you're doing writing, which you always should do. So if you're doing reading interventions with your children and you're separating the writing and the reading, you definitely want to make sure that you're tackling writing explicitly at least twice a week, that you're working on your writing. I'm going to give you some tips on how to incorporate writing in a second, but the most important thing in doing this when you're sitting down to practice writing is that you don't just ask your child to write something and work on their writing on their own without you first sitting down. If you're going to write a letter to grandma, if you're whatever it is that you're going to do, construct a proper paragraph, you need to actually do it with your child first. The child has to see you do it. That's how you assert your authority and your expertise, and that's how you can set the bar for what you want your child to do. So start with creating a proper paragraph, and you will be surprised that we have middle schoolers, high schoolers that don't understand how to write a proper paragraph. Now, the paragraph in an essay in high school or in college gets more complex, but at the end of the day, if you do not have your first sentence, your supporting details, and your concluding kind of summarizing sentence that's going to kind of blend and give some life. So the first sentence and the last sentence kind of give that life to that and that structure to that paragraph. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter if it's a complex paragraph or not, or an essay from college or whatever, you do not have a properly constructed paragraph. So we have to make sure that our children know how to construct a paragraph. So you're going to do it with the child, and then they're going to do it. And you're going to do that until you master that skill. We have to make sure that our children, because then an essay or a paper, a report, is just 3 paragraphs. And then from 3 paragraphs, we go to 8 paragraphs. And from 8 paragraphs, we go to 3 pages. It doesn't matter. You have to go from one well-constructed paragraph to another one to another one. And until we can master that one skill, we can't go to the next one. So make sure that your children know how to write a paragraph. Sounds simple. It's not necessarily the simplest thing. So another little skill that I like to go with when you're constructing a paragraph is to just write, like, you yourself would come up with a theme, like, these are foods or things that I eat or things that I enjoy. You and your child, you can do this orally, but when you're doing writing, you want to write it. And you will come up with, you would write like little 4 details. So these are foods that I like, that I enjoy eating. Or these are foods: avocados, salads, smoothies, collard greens, right? So smoothie, even though smoothies are food, smoothie would be drinking, right? So make those subtle examples. That's a subtle thing that they would pick up on which one would be the detail that you would not include in that paragraph, because you're talking about eating. All of those are foods. The smoothie could go in there, but it's not the best thing to go in there because it's technically a drink, right? So those are kinds of the exercises that you can come up with your child, where you give, so that you know that they know how to put proper details in a paragraph. So come up with ways to practice thematics, the first topic sentence, then 3 to 4 details, and that you're developing good details because you want good paragraphs, and then that you have concluding sentences. So do that with your child. You do it, then they do it. And you can practice different ways to make the first sentence interesting. Let me tell you about my house. Clearly, the paragraph is going to be about my house, but now you're kind of engaging the reader. So there's ways to come up with that first sentence being more interesting. Last sentence, I'm glad I got to share with you some details about where I live, right? So kind of like that gratitude, again, engaging the reader. So there's ways to make a very simple paragraph dynamic, and there's ways to practice that. So you can do that with your child. But the important thing is, until you do it, your child's not going to know how to do it. And make sure that you're doing it with your child, and that you guys write paragraphs, well-constructed paragraphs, until your child can take any subject, the writing ball, what happened today, any subject, and they can write a paragraph. Until you get to that well-constructed paragraph on any topic, you don't move past writing paragraphs at least once a week. So that's my spiel on writing paragraphs. So once they do it, then you're good. So you do it, and then the child does it. The last thing you want to do is then you want to go to a text that is already written, and you want to go to that text, especially something that doesn't have dialogue. So go to a paragraph that doesn't have dialogue. So you don't even have to follow the story for this, but go to a paragraph and find the first sentence, the details, and the closing. So every time you practice a skill, writing, then you want to go into a text and actually look at how an author has done that. And then you have your child see what it is that you guys are trying to do. So that's one thing that I was just gonna work on that today, in how to write paragraphs, because again, writing, we have to be really good at reading, but we have to be really good at writing. And a lot of our children, I get it a lot from teachers telling me that children don't know how to write paragraphs. They don't know how to write reports. And you can't write a report until you know how to write a paragraph. And it's very important that you do it first, and then you have your child do it second, and that you really master how to write a paragraph. So, okay, so how to encourage writing with your child. If your child is, again, kindergarten, first, second, third, and my son, like, for example, he's not, he loves to read. He loves to do a lot of things academically, but writing is like, I have to coerce him into writing. So here's some ideas of what you can do. And one of them is they have to, especially if you have a board like this, it's really easy. So whatever they want to eat, they have to write it. If they want something around the house, a request, they have to write it. You can write notes to each other. When my son was like 2 to 3 to 4, I would wake up in the morning and I would write like, "You are my inspiration." And then he would have to write me kind of like a love note back. And so you can go back and forth, write each other announcements, write each other love notes. You can write the menu. So you can write, "Today for dinner, we're having whatever it is that you're having," and they can pick. Like, let's say you're gonna have 2 sides, they can pick one and they can write out what they want. It could be something like that. If your child wants a new video game, or your child wants a new movie or a new toy, you can have them get it so long as they're able to write it. And it can be on a board, or it can be on a notebook that they do. You can have that. Journaling is really good. Writing movie reviews or video game reviews. So I'll say, yeah, you can have a new game, but first you have to give me a review of something that of the last one that I purchased. What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? So a review. A new movie, does that movie get 5 stars? Does that movie get 2 stars? Is it an action movie? Was it funny? Who were the main characters? You can kind of summarize a movie, or you can give it a review. What did you like about it? Compare it to another movie. So when children want something, sometimes you have to make them work for it a little bit, and that can be one way that they can work on it. So requests around the house, food requests, reviews, toy requests, any of that has to be written down. And those are kind of like small ways that you can encourage for a child that's already struggling to read to start writing independently. So I am going to keep this short. Like I said, today I had to rush here to try to put this webinar together, and we will continue to build on writing next week. Once again, this is a huge skill that you have to make sure that your children have. If you have any questions, and I will come up with other kind of tricks on how to help you get there, but it's a very important skill that a lot of teachers tell me that our children are not mastering. And and a lot of the times it's because children are overwhelmed and they really just don't know how to do it. And they need to kind of like warm up with a person that loves them, a person that they're comfortable with. They have to kind of warm up and just go through the process with you modeling, and then they can write it. And that's it for this week. I'll be here next week, Wednesday at 9 o'clock. as always, make sure that you're emailing me your questions, or if you're a teacher and you have something that you want to contribute, or that you want to, like, again, teachers tell me that they would really like parents to work on their paragraphs. So anything that you suggest, or that you see children really falling behind on, you're more than welcome to write your suggestions. If you're a parent and you want to contact me, all of that goes through my email. It's urbanbigaloud@gmail. Make sure that you check out the other 2 webinars, and together we'll get this right. Bye, guys.